Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the conversation series. I am so excited to have Sammy Simpson here with me today. He is the creator of the Just Show Up platform. He is the founder of Tuned In Corporation. He's an author, a speaker, and an inner voice motivator. And I am so excited to have him here. So, Sammy, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here
Yes.
and talking to you, first of all. And, I'll do it two ways because I'll do most of my life. Many people have known me is I grew up in the radio business starting when I was 16 years old. And I had a very fortunate and a career that I'm very grateful for that took me across and around the country and all the way to New York City to work for Z100, which is just an iconic brand in pop music. And I, just had a great experience-based result of learning communication and marketing and branding, and just did that for, gosh, 30
Yeah.
years of my life. Went in to the New York Daily News for a while, started my own social media company, went into the entertainment finance world. So I had a long corporate background, but all along, then I'll change to what I like to say is my authentic resume.
Yes.
And my authentic resume is I'm an ayahuasca journeyer that turned preacher and soulful guide. And I started a platform a couple of years ago called the Just Show Up, which is a
Yeah.
catalyst of really helping be an example of my mission that everything in the world is interconnected in your inner and outer world. And the more that we can surrender that everything is a catalyst, I always say, if it gets your attention, pay attention.
Yes.
Uh, and a big part of my work now is through the Just Show Up of being that example, and also content creation. I'm writing a book, those kind of things. And that's what I feel my purpose is, and I came here to do. But I can talk from all different sides of a lot of different things. So
Yes. And so today, going from, I mean, you were just saying it, your 30 years of experience in broadcasting, radio, what made or how did you get into that authentic side of your resume? When did that happen?
I think it was happening my whole life because I was always very curious when I was I always say in my own reflection now as a kid, I grew up with this really interesting grandmother who was a devout Baptist. She went to church every chance she could, but then at home at night, she would read my fortune with a deck of playing cards, and she would have herbal remedies. And I was convinced my grandmother was a witch. And she would, and what started this journey for me out of curiosity was she very much was a believer in the doctrine of you kind of suffer through a life and then you die and go to heaven. And I went back now and realized that a big part of this search for me of that authentic self was I was always, that selfish little boy. I was like, well, why do we have to wait? Why can't we do this now? And then my mother also would instill in me this idea that you can do anything you put your mind to. And that became just the mantra of my life because I grew up very humbly and a bit poor, but I always believed that no matter what I put my mind to, that I could make that happen. And that's kind of how I started radio when I was 14 years old. I imagined one day, I said, I want to play music and make people feel good and let them pay me. And so I started becoming like a DJ, a mobile DJ. And I was doing proms and weddings and all these things. And by the time I was 16, I had made enough money to buy myself a new car, which was unheard of in my family. So all of a sudden, I was proving to myself through the journey that, hey, my mom was right. You can do anything you put your mind to. And then that evolved into radio, which I always had a great fascination with. And then from there, I just kind of became a student. And through the experience based results, I just had this wonderful journey of meeting all these great connectors and these crazy wise people that just, gave me this master's in kind of life as I was learning, like, hey, what is great communication? Because radio was about, how do you grab attention? How do you talk to one to touch many? How do you make a difference in the community? So all these beautiful things were happening. And I just, I'm really grateful for that experience.
I love that. And while we're on it, I just want to ask you because I find it so radio is such a beast. It is such a different thing compared to TV or when you're just watching a video on YouTube or whatever it may be. You are solely just listening to somebody. But what was your fascination with radio? What got you hooked with that?
Yeah, you said it. I mean, they call it the theater of the mind. I mean, that really is the stage of radio. I had a great mentor named Nick Michaels who would say to me, he would constantly pound in me the difference in the power of the voice is if you say it well and you say it right, it will continue to rattle around in your mind long after you turn it off. And I just thought that was the magic of radio because I grew up at a time when radio was still incredibly dominant. There was, these bigger than life radio stations that were not only playing your favorite songs and your favorite artist, but they had this showbiz about them, this bigness and it would just fill you up. And I very much wanted to be a part of that whole atmosphere.
And it seems like now today the world of podcasting has kind of taken over that big monster of a machine. Just in the industry itself, it's kind of taken over that seat from radio of everybody's got a podcast, but there are so many out there and it's just churning constantly.
Yeah, yeah. And I think you could say that, I look at it as, I had a great mentor as I was learning strategy for many years. And the one thing that he would constantly remind is that, nothing ever dies, it just gets thinner.
Yeah.
They still make stagecoaches today, even though it's not the preferred form of transportation. And the reality is they make more money building stagecoaches today than they did back then because now it's a real specialty, right? And I think what we're seeing not only in radio, but across the mass media business, television, newspaper, radio that dominated the industry for so long
Yeah.
is that it's just getting thinner. Radio will always have a place
Yeah.
as much as those other areas. And now podcasting has come along. And what I find interesting about podcasting, just like the mobile phone, is that we're all content creators. We're able to
Yeah.
share our voice.
Yep.
And podcasting gives us a chance to kind of really find those niches, so to
Yes.
speak.
Yes.
Radio is more of a mass
Yes.
medium that and that's the whole, if you think about that, there's two strategies. There's really the all of one strategy, which is niche, or the sum of all. And radio is kind of that sum of all. That's why you'll find that, the way that they're presented and will continue to be presented. But certainly there's a lane for both. The biggest part that everyone has to deal with now is just such an over communicated world, is that when there were television, newspaper, radio,
Yeah.
it was a lot easier to market and manipulate, so to speak, so that you could find an audience a lot faster. But I do find, personally, as a marketer and a brander and a communicator, I like the world that we live in. I like everyone has a voice. And I always say, if you're real and authentic about it, you're going to find an audience for that. You just have to bring a different business mindset, which radio has struggled with, because when you get a big piece of the advertising pie and suddenly it starts to shrink, that really impacts your business because of the way you've built the foundation of business. Podcasting is able to build it now from the ground up, of saying, we know we're a niche product and we're probably going to attract that kind of sponsorship.
I like what you said though about the world of podcasting, because I think I'm sure you've gotten to experience this, but when you get to sit down like we're doing right now with each individual person, you take away something from each of those interviews, whether it's a feeling, whether it's a new lesson, whatever it may be. I think it's incredible what you're able to get from each episode and each person you get to sit down and talk with. And I, like you were saying, I think that's the incredible piece of podcasting and the
Yeah.
beautiful part of this world that has been created for us.
Yeah, yeah. Because think about it. I mean, you can't expand time. There's only so much time. So in order to kind of gain a share, you have to take that time from someplace else. And I think a lot of what podcasting, as you said so well, really does is that you get to invest your time now in something that you're ridiculously passionate about, or something you want to learn, or a person that you admire or want to emulate. And now, whether it's podcasting or social or all these different, areas that we have now, you can get closer to those subjects, I think, than ever before, because there's so much possibility. Plus, I love that, each person, we get to really, this idea that I like to say, that we're all these unique notes in this big symphony. You get to kind of go behind the curtain of that unique note and kind of see what's driving and motivating them. And you find that synergy of, oh my gosh, that I'm as passionate about that too. And that's what I love about podcasting.
Yes. And I like the personal aspect of it as well. Like you and I were doing before we started the episode, like you and I are both runners. We got to have that personal connection as well. You go
Yes.
in and you kind of have, I always enjoyed the beginning and the end of each episode when, recording starts and stops, because you get to kind of have those conversations that you may not be having here. We can react with what we were talking about with running. We can absolutely do that, but I enjoy that because it's letting me get to know you or whoever I'm interviewing more, so it doesn't feel so stuffy or uptight or whatever that feeling might be. It's a little bit more free flowing. It's a little bit more relaxed and a nice environment.
Yeah, I always say in my coaching, as I've talked to talent and people over the years, it's so important. And I use these three values: real, raw, ridiculous. Because that is really the key. Because I grew up at a time in the radio business where a lot of entertainment was so polished, right? You only saw the best product. It's kind of like that meme you see. It says, stop comparing your life to everyone's best of.
Yes.
And that was a lot of what would happen in the media world, because they were built that, even in branding, it was like you put the research and development in, you created the
Yeah.
perfect or best product or show or whatever, and then you put it out to the world. To where now it's the complete opposite. It's like, just go. It's like fire, then aim.
Yeah.
Because what they learn, as you pointed out, is in the realness and the rawness, and sometimes even the ridiculousness, is everything is right on time. And you'll find that deeper connection, to where it's not just that, hey, I've built this incredible facade or storefront, and when you come inside you realize, it's probably a little shallow. I think with podcasting you get to drill a little deeper into that depth, and that's what people want today.
And I think to the point you just made, when we this very big world of podcasting, it's there's a lot being shoved at you. There is, I mean, even when we were talking about, it used to be radio, newspaper, very small amounts where you could be pushed content out to. Today, if you do not, like, to your point of fire and then aim, you kind of have to, because everybody else is doing it as well. Everybody else is pushing their content out to you. So it's either do it first or you're going to be last, and you may not get your
Yeah.
content listened to, read, whatever it might be.
Yeah, and I think it's, and as you're getting into the experience-based result of it, is just continuing to fine tune and to learn. Because I've found a lot in working with people over the years in podcasting and specifically. And, I go all the way back to in 2005, helping launch one of the first commercial podcasts in Washington, D.C. in those days. So I've been following this forever, as many people have. But I think it's also, this is just the honesty of yourself at times, is that there's so many, with all due respect, girlfriends or guy friends that will sit at a bar and have a funny conversation and think, oh my God, this should be a podcast. No, that's a conversation. And you're funny and you're lovely, and I'm
Yeah.
sure you're interesting, but it's also finding that, as one of my other mentors would always say, turn that microphone or camera around and, think about it from the point of view of who that listener
Yes.
is.
Yes.
Because a lot of times I think we miss that very important element of building the right foundation of, oh my God, this is interesting to me. And then we kind of realize, well, it isn't interesting to as many
Yep.
people as we thought. And it just creates a very crowded marketplace. Now that's okay, but it just makes, as you're marketing what you're doing, it
Harder.
just, you can't use those same old tools and techniques that a lot of people are still trying to recycle and just kind of, say, I'm just going to bombard you over the head. And to the point you do that, because, if you're driving a bulldozer and it's not good content, you're not going to, drive them into listening or watching.
I was actually just talking with a guest a couple weeks ago, and he has a podcast, and they started it during the pandemic. And we were talking about it. We're like, it's very rare to hear a project that was started in the pandemic is still going 3 years later. Because to your point, those conversations that people thought would be great podcasts, it filled that gap that they needed during the pandemic, and they died they the podcast or whatever project they've been working at had died because it had fulfilled their purpose of getting them through the pandemic or whatever it was. It's very rare that those projects are still alive today.
Yeah, yeah, and I think you could see that in any, specific amount of time. Certainly, COVID is a very escalated, rare time in
Yeah.
our existence that, speaks to that very well. But, I think as you're thinking about podcasting and you're thinking about just, how do you create an audience, so to speak, that's going to be a very important part of, just as you're talking to that one to touch many,
Yep. Yep.
really, what is the big V word? What is the value? And sometimes for some people the value may be, in my case, I say it all the time. There are things that I post and put out in the world, and people will be like, why are you doing that? It doesn't seem that interesting. And I'm like, well, I'm just leaving breadcrumbs for my kids, because some days maybe they'll find that. So, and that's okay, right? Because I think you just have to be really real and authentic about the why. It's like, why am I doing this? Because that's when you start to think about your strategy and what you can control. You can control your componentry, your marketing, your technology, all those type of areas. The competitive side of the business is something you're never going to control. And unfortunately, so many people get so focused on trying to control those things that are never possible, that they kind of miss the forest from the trees. So it's always like, come back to yourself and really, build the right strategy. There's a ton of people out there that do this, that can help you
Yeah.
uh, to do it really well. And I think, if you're really serious about it, that's a big step to take.
I relate to that breadcrumb analogy, and I like that so much because I always have this phase where I'm like, should I continue doing this? Like, I have a full-time job. This is not my full time. I'd love it to be, but I'm like, should I continue doing this? And I'm like, yes, I should, because I would like to leave behind something that people can learn from. You know what I mean? Like, whatever it may be, there are always nuggets that come from every single guest and every single topic, that I love that breadcrumb analogy, that it's something to leave behind, uh,
Yeah.
while you're continuing walking on your path.
And the other part I would say, I did this a lot in my coaching is, and this is a big part of strategic planning. And I think it's a real one of the missions that I love about this part of strategic planning is sit down and get really honest with yourself and write a letter to yourself a year from today and just go backwards and tell yourself what you're going to do with it,
Yeah.
and not fluffy hoity BS, but the, okay, I want to grow this podcast. I want 10,000 people to listen to it on average, or whatever it is for you. I'd like to make some amount of money on it, whatever that may, and really, put those numbers in there and give yourself a way to build goals and tactics for yourself that you can really take action, because that's a big part of it, is just, okay, a year, if I'm still doing this a year from now, and a year is very realistic for all of us in this fast moving world, is, what does it look like? Who is it attracted? What partnerships or sponsorships or revenue or listening has it driven on that time? And what you'll find is that most of us play very safe when we write visions. But, as my teacher would say, think big and big things will occur. It's not to, again, don't fool yourself and say, I'm going to have a million. But, I saw a video series recently. A friend was sharing with me about Mr. Beast, and they shared the video of like his very first YouTube video. And that's what he was doing. On that video, he was basically saying, in a year from now, I want to have 10,000 viewers. And you think now 10,000 viewers is minuscule for this guy that is the king of the world, but he started the same way. He gave himself a simple vision. He did it in his own way, but the same thing came out of that because it started really creating action and a way to drive things forward.
And I love that you brought up the writing the letter, because I actually do write one every year, and every year I'm stunned that I'm like, wow, I actually wrote that down, but I'm also like, my God, I'm like, I said these things. I have that like, wow. And it is very weird to kind of go back and read what you
Yeah.
wrote a year ago. It's an odd feeling for me sometimes.
Yeah. And I would always say in that case, I break it down because, in every quarter, there's a great report card there. So in your
Yes.
vision, you can build a project, a program, or a campaign out of everything you wrote in that letter. And I would say, make yourself a list. There's your tactics
Yeah.
that you can work on each quarter. And then each quarter, you can go back and kind of look at those three areas and
Yeah.
say, okay, success, celebrate, revision, because like you said, oh my God, I can't believe I wrote it that way, or feedback, it's no longer relevant, so let's move it out and replace it with another project, program, or campaign that's
Yep.
more realistic for today.
Yep.
And that just gives you a little bit of accountability around vision and helps you to kind of continue to steer, knowing that we live in such a fast paced, fast moving, things will change overnight kind of world.
I want to tune into the Tuned In Corporation, and I want just to hear you set the stage of what this corporation is, why you created it, how you created it, what was the motivation to start it.
Yeah, well, Tuned In was really about, around my authentic resume, as I like to say, because, it was just that idea of really tuning into yourself and starting trusting yourself to know that, the deep, meaty answers of life that we're all seeking are always going to be found inside of you. And that's the spirit of Tuned In Corporation. And what it does is, it's done a few things over the years, but, really it's at the basis of my Just Show Up platform,
Yes.
which is my show and podcast. But also through some coaching that I've done. I'm not a big fan. I've spent a lot of time over the years in my own feedback of, in thinking about, who is this guy? What is Tuned In?
Yep.
Of, am I a consultant? Am I this? And then I'm all that. And I've tried all those things, and I've certainly had some great success with that as well. But really now, Tuned In's focus is around really spreading this message of embodying your true nature
Yeah.
and finding harmony with everything. That's really the idea. And I do it through the Just Show Up platform. I've written some books. I'm writing a new book now called The Keeper of Heaven that I'm excited to be putting out not too long from now. And then I do a lot around content creation now, just these, what I call these little breadcrumbs of self-awakening, these little messages that just kind of talk to be like, hey, here's, no one can ever tell you what to do, but just for some guidance to look in yourself to kind of explore these areas of non-judgment and lightness, explore that everything is interconnected inside and outside of you. And the more you surrender to start realizing that life will communicate what it needs you to do, you get in this state of, I wonder what will happen next. And it becomes very exciting way to live, because you're not so much caught up in the stress and everything of the mind, always trying to figure it out, which I was at one point in my life, and more surrendering to, okay, well, if there is this kind of synergy in the universe with how I'm living, then I don't know, but I'm curious. Let's
Yeah.
see what's out there. So that's what it's all about.
And I love the Just Show Up platform. And I find like I always have a sense of joy when watching it. And I feel like that feeling and emotion is such a big part of the platform. What I love is each episode is described, it has a one word description, whether it be change, truth, burden. What is your thought process there with that? Because I'm like, how do I get a title for each of my guests? But you come down to one word. How do you get that out of each guest?
Well, it was a wonderful accident, is what it
Okay.
was. But because the story of the Just Show Up is I started the platform back in 2020 during COVID, just as a way that I would show up I think we did it on Fridays at the time at 4 o'clock Eastern time. And then I would just invite all these people to just show up, because the deeper meaning was in 2019, I did an Akashic record reading, which is a big part of my world. I love the Akashic record. And through the record, it actually said the message that came was start a clubhouse where people just show up to uplift and inspire and explore with no other purpose, and show that anyone can be a catalyst for change. So I was like, ooh, I really like that. So I said, oh, well, we're all kind of home anyway. Let's get together. And then we started creating what we called conversation starters, where
Yep.
someone would come in and kind of share their world. And then we would all kind of talk about it, without any
Yeah.
explanation. And then earlier, when I brought back the second season, or earlier this year, after a bit of a hiatus for a couple of years while I was in a corporate job myself,
Yep.
um, I had met someone through I had done a TikTok video about this self-awakening idea, and someone reached out to me through TikTok and said, we should have a conversation. And I said, great. And I said, you know what? I think I'll just record this. And then I've done a lot of study in my own awakening journey around shamanism, which speaks to me.
Yep.
So I have these shamanic healing oracle cards that were sitting right next to me. And I said, you know what? I'm going to deduce today's date to a single number, and let's pull that card and see what the topic is, and we'll talk about it. And the cards are fit perfectly for these conversations. So now the way it works, to your question, is we just show up. Neither me or the guest know the topic. We
Okay.
deduce the date we're recording to a single number. I pull that card, and then it will be everything from dissolving illusions to
Yeah.
change to, and then I use that shamanic teaching as kind of the gateway to get into this conversation. And what's profound about it is, what I find is that, and if you watch the show,
Yeah.
shameless plug, is that the topic is always right on time.
It is.
Like, it's so interesting. Like, I had a guest on two weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, and the topic was truth. And at the end of the show, she was like, I wasn't going to say anything. She said, but look at my tattoo. My tattoo, I've had this tattoo of truth my whole life. I mean, it's weird. It's these
Yeah.
beautiful, weird coincidences that just bring a lot of joy for me. So I'm glad to see that's coming through.
Well, and I think it was one of your most recent episodes, Matthew Blade, and I think it was Change. And when I was reading, I was like, my God, I was like, this is spot on for exactly the journey he had been on from leaving his radio show, everything. And I was stunned. So to even hear that now, I am stunned that it's like picking the perfect card or
Yeah.
description for each conversation.
Yeah, and I always, and I find that's a bit of the synchronicity. Is it's kind of that gut check, right? Is that am I doing the right thing? And selfishly for me, that's when this comes up to go, like you asked earlier, should I keep doing this, right? Because I that question goes through my mind too, because I'm like, is anyone really watching? Hello, is this microphone even on, kind of thing? But because of that very aspect that we've done now 10, 11, 12, 30, there are 9 episodes. The 10th episode was released today, as a matter
Yeah.
of fact. I have like 4 more ready to go. And I will say that of every single one of them, that dynamic has just showed up. And I'm like, okay, well, this is, the person or persons that are ready to see, hear, experience this will find it. And that's when I can let go of getting my head all wrapped around the metrics and the numbers and the shares and the follows and the likes, because I very much believe it is a part of my mission in the work of Tuned In and my own personal purpose. And that's why I felt the call to do it, and I honor it, and I will continue to do so.
Yeah, I just and talking around like should I continue like we were talking about. I just like having these conversations. Like I'm very much I have a full-time corporate job. For me, this is a break in my day where I get to sit down and it's very cathartic. It's very just nice to step out of that corporate box sometimes and sit down with somebody and just fully have a completely different conversations than the ones you have when you're sitting in meetings all day.
Yeah, isn't it great? It's so refreshing. And I find that, I always like to remind people, especially for us corporate types, someone somewhere right now is arguing over the color of a font. So just remember that there's an email trail that's probably about 32 emails deep right now with reply all on that very topic. And we're getting to have this wonderful conversation of meeting in a space that is just very real and raw and organic and is not have an agenda and all those things that you run into a lot of times. And that is just so refreshing.
Now, when you're saying people are reaching out to you and saying, let's have a conversation, how are you getting guests? Like, who are you looking for? What does that process look like in your head?
Well, for me, it comes in a lot of different ways. There's certainly people, there have been a couple of people on the Just Show Up that were a part of the first season that I thought were incredibly interesting. An energy healer named Kim Bellissimo. Next week's episode is with a lady named Pooja Shakuri. I hope I got that right. And she is had a was very indoctrinated in cult-like religion and has found her way out and is doing afterlife studies and and it was just such a great conversation. So there's that. There's other people that I've reached out to. I'm very excited, like the actress and director Nicole Ansari, who is married to Brian Cox from Secessions. She's coming on this season with me. And again, it's just, as I said, the mission of the show is to be an example that you, me, or anyone can be a catalyst for change. So I like to look out and finding folks from all walks of life. Nicole she talks about, studying with these amazing masters of yoga and theta healing. And then you'll meet, I met someone at this beautiful Russian lady at a party in St. Petersburg, Florida, that just had been on this incredible journey. And I said, would you come and be a guest? So I find that it comes in the way the show is, from all walks of life. And there's people I know and people I don't know. Sometimes people will reach out and go, oh, you should talk to this person.
Yeah.
So I very much appreciate and honor, wherever it comes from.
Sammy, my last question for you is just what inspires you?
What inspires me? What inspires me is just the joy of surrender.
Okay.
I've really learned to get out of my way after not for a very long time, and I just find that life will surprise and delight you that way. And just as we talked about with the guest and all these number of things is, I've been to 5 countries and driven across country and back in the last 8 or 9 months. And what I found is that it's universal. Is that the more you just kind of just show up and just without knowing an answer or being anything first, just kind of be present. I have I've had surprises and delights and conversations in every place I've been that were just so profound and so uplifting and inspiring. And I'm curious now. I'm like, when will it happen again? And that's what really inspires me. When will it happen again?
Just show up to me, it means so many things. And I think, the literal phrase of it, just show up. I think we all get tangled up in our daily lives and, we hear the phrase be present all the time, but just showing up for the people in your life and things like that. I've tried to do better about that myself. And because we are such a technological world of laptop, cameras, computer, whatever it may, phones, just to show up and be present sometimes is one of the biggest things. How I've been taking that for the longest time.
Yeah, yeah, and I think and be my masters and teachers always say be compassionate for the human condition. We are human, and we're caught up in what we're. I always say if it gets your attention, pay attention on one side because that's a little guidance. But then on the other side is in this idea of just showing up without knowing an answer or being anything first. It's not a test, it's not a race.
Yeah.
There's not a finish line. It's like just give yourself the grace of, okay, I'll try it once today, and then maybe I'll try it 3 times today, or maybe I won't try it at all today. Today, screw it. I'm doing my own thing. I'm selfish today, right? There's no right or wrong here. So, if it calls to you in any way, just, kind of, try it on and see how it feels, and then see where it goes from there.
My dad's famous phrase that he loves to say to all of us is life is a marathon, not a sprint.
Absolutely.
And he will say it to everybody, and he has said it to everybody. So as I've gotten older, I'm like, it is very much a marathon, and we are still running.
Yeah, the journey. And I think that's what, a lot of times we're so caught up, but we're also kind of, we're conditioned to pass the test and get the big jobs and all those type of things. And there's nothing wrong with that, because you can certainly have that on your side, but it's just a matter of, again, finding yourself some grace of that balance between both. And you're going to be a lot healthier and happier for it because you can't have your cake and eat it too fully, but you can
Yeah.
certainly have a good work-life balance.
Yes. Sammy, I can't thank you enough for joining me today and being here.
Yes.
And you guys, if you do not follow Sammy, I'm going to have all of his socials down below. Please go check out the Just Show Up platform. Listen to Just Show Up. New episodes every Wednesday. But Sammy, I can't thank you enough for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me. So
Yes.
fun.
Yes. And as always, I will see you guys back here next time. Bye, y'all.